What's up, guys? I'm Automatic Jack here with another video about Horus Heresy Legions. I got a comment on my last video about posting the deck list for new players that I was using as Corbax, and actually I want to do one better. So this is going to be a little bit of a different format, but I am here to preach the gospel of why my man Cor'bax Utterblight here is, in my opinion, the absolute best Warlord in the game for new players to start with on their journey up the rank ladder. Here's my reasoning. I think there are about 3 or 4 major things about Corbax that put him in a position to be both competitive and very easy to get started with. So with that in mind, let's dive in, and then from there we'll go and take a look at the deck that I am currently using. All right. So Corbax is a Ruinstorm Warlord. They are one of the traitor factions, although it is hard to call them traitors as they were pretty much always on that side. And they are a faction that consists almost exclusive, or in fact exclusively, of demon troops, troops with the demon tag. The Ruinstorm troops are usually, many of them are going to have either rally effects or other effects that will buff themselves or each other, much like many factions, and their faction-specific mechanic is something called Mutate. Mutate is a card that will allow you to change your demons. It'll give you 3 choices, and you can pick from one of those mutations to enhance the demon with. Some troops get it on the rally, like Chaos Fury, for example, or Demon Brutes, and some troops generate mutations, like Plague Bearer or Gittlejaw, and then you can apply those mutations to any troop. In addition, we have this card, Path of Blood. So we'll talk about that and why it makes a difference, but let's start off with the Warlord himself. So Corbax. Corbax is an epic Warlord, 35 health, we can see in there, and has the standard 2 attack. And looking at his stats sheet, we can see right from the beginning that this guy is pretty forgiving. He's got 35 health, solid, very solid. He's got, on top of that, a relentless heal 1 to a random unit. So if he is damaged, which means if you attack with your first turn and you have nothing else on the board, he gets one of those hit points back. At the absolute worst, if you have nothing else to do, you can face bash the enemy Warlord, and you're trading up because you are gaining an extra point of damage that he is going to just heal right back. On top of that, Corbax has a really useful ability. Now, I know that poison is not very popular here, but poison, it has seen some downsides, especially the change to the sacrifice mechanic has made poison a little bit less viable than it was before. But poison is great for utility removal. It works across the board. Corbax can poison a random enemy, and yes, it is random, but he can act again after he does that. That means for 6 energy, you can poison 3 enemy troops on the board and then attack. That's a lot. I mean, that is a lot. It doesn't matter if something has 10 health and ward. It doesn't matter if the enemy troop is stealthed. Night Lords hate fighting this guy because they flop out that recon claw on the first turn, you poison it, and it's gone. It gets 1 action, maybe. This is a fantastic power, especially for this stealth-heavy meta that we're looking at right now. You don't have to worry much about including a lot of anti-stealth in your deck. You don't have to worry much about including tons of tricky ways to remove things. You're not going to get a lot of dependable flank, and I don't think they have any fast at all. But you really don't need it as much as long as you can, take the damage from the one thing that's getting poisoned and then gets 1 action and goes. There are ways of removing poison in the game. Mortarion can do it, for example, but it's not common. It's not common. It's really mostly in the Death Guard, and you don't see many Death Guard. And even then, if they can remove it, that's just one of the tricks in your tool bag. So Corbax himself, having this relentless heal, having the ability to poison a lot of troops, if you can do nothing else, you can always throw out a poison. It's not terrible. It's really not. Initiative low seems bad, but Corbax has a very utilitarian power for his counterattack. My cat is really helping me make this video right now. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Corbax's Ruinstorm counterattack is deal 1 damage. So just for free, it deals 1 damage to any unit on the board, which is a great way. They put out a 3 health troop, you smash it with your face, and you toss the counterattack on it, and it's dead. A lot of factions put out those initial 3 health troops thinking, oh, okay, well, I'm going to be able to, stop this guy. I'm going to be able to keep this troop on the board, and the enemy's not going to be able to get rid of it right away, or they're going to have to use removal. Not necessarily with that counterattack. The counterattack is pretty dependable. You're going to get it in about 80 to 90% of games since you're a low initiative Warlord. And it just comes in handy. It's a great card. It's very useful. Doesn't require anywhere near as much thought as some of the more complicated counterattacks that, like, for example, the Blood Angels that put pawns on the board. I mean, that's great for the Blood Angels, but you, as a brand new player, you're not necessarily going to know what to do with that. All right, another thing that makes Corbax super new player friendly is that he has so many cards that are commons and rares and are hugely useful. So let's take a look at one of my personal favorites, Demonettes. Demonettes is a 3-cost 4/2 with sneak attack, which means it does not take damage when it attacks. And on top of that, if you play it onto an empty board, it starts out stealth. Yes, I mean, 2 health is not going to last forever. It is not going to last very long at all. But you can almost guarantee, not guarantee, but almost guarantee, that it is going to get at least 1 attack off as sneak attack and still stick on the board and have to be removed. It becomes a high priority thing. Like, you can sneak attack off an enemy troop and then force the enemy Warlord to face bash it off for 4 damage, all for 3 energy. When we get into talking about mutations, we'll see we can make this troop even better. Demonettes is a great starter troop. Plaguebearer, another one. A common. It's common. Any enemy that dies puts Mutate into your hand. Mutate is a 1 energy power that lets you change your demons. Has 4 health to start with. Has at least respectable attack. He's tough. He's tough. A 4 health troop for 3 energy. And he's just going to crank out those mutations early on. The enemy has to do something about this. He can't just let this sit on the board. All right, take a look at another one, Path of Blood. It's a mutation for 3 energy, but it has essentially reflection. It's kind of like Reflection Light. It's reflection that will come back into your hand provided that you play it on something that does not have a mutation. Great card, tons of utility, especially when we take a look at some of their really high-cost useful cards. Path of Blood can make them that much better. Fallen is another one. 4/3 frontline. I cannot tell you how many times this angry little guy has saved my butt. He's a 3 energy common. You can put him in anywhere. Yes, he has to attack every time because he's Berserk, but at 4 damage, I mean, you slam him into the enemy Warlord's face. If he has full health, he's still going to stick on the board, and he's a frontline. Great, outstanding card. All right. Looking on through some of these, let's look at some of their rares. Oh, sorry, one more common to look at. Plague Ridden. Plague Ridden is also a super useful card. I stopped running 2 of them because I think the 2 was kind of overkill, but it makes up for one of the faction's weaknesses. Ruinstorm does not have a lot of draw. Instead of draw, they have card creation. So with the Plague Ridden, if you have a demon that you know is going to die that turn, you can just throw out the Plague Ridden, make your moves with that demon, it dies, and then you get it right back. There's no need to draw. It's much more consistent than draw in the sense that it gives you the card that you want. So looking on at some of the rare cards, we'll go to a higher cost one. Gidal'jal. 6/9 body for 7 energy. That's a chunky boy. I mean, this is a big guy. And if the enemy has used his removal getting rid of some of your other stuff, Gidal'jal is not going anywhere. Even if it doesn't have ward, it takes a lot to kill it. I mean, this thing can eat a Vengeful Spirit and stay right there on the board. On top of that, it relentlessly puts a copy of Mutate in your hand. With 9 health, it is pretty likely. I mean, Relentless is sometimes tricky to trigger, but again, noob friendly. This thing will stay on the board. I've had Gidal'jals make 4 or 5 mutations for me. You can just, if your hand's getting full, you can just slap the mutation right back on the Gidal'jal. A quick note for those of you who play factions with demons, or rather for those of you who are not familiar with demons, most demons in the game that are under the Chaos neutral faction have what's called maintenance. Maintenance is a number that comes out of your energy pool for when you have those demons starting on the board. So like when you start a turn with a demon with maintenance 3 on the board, you have 3 fewer energy points than you would have otherwise. Ruinstorm demons do not have maintenance. And on top of that, Mutate reduces maintenance for Chaos demons. So if you have a Chaos demon that you really want to add to your deck, every time that you play a Mutate on it, it will reduce its maintenance cost by 1 down to free. Unfortunately, they cannot give you bonus energy. All right, looking at another couple that I include in the deck. Both rares, not even epics. Demon Brutes. 4/5 body for 5. Okay, not great, but okay. But it's really the rally where it shines, because suddenly this thing can become a 7/5 for 5. It can become a 4/5 ward. It can become a 4/7 poison. I mean, these are big, big troops. Big troops. And it's a 5 cost. The enemy doesn't want to waste hard removal on a 5 cost, but he's got to do something about it. It can't just sit. You have a lot of options for how you can get great utility out of this troop. If he's playing really wide, you could get Rage on it, you could get Cleave. Lots of different things that you can do with this guy. He comes with a guaranteed mutation, and then absolute worst comes to worst. You know, the enemy plays a turn where he's like Raven Guard, for example, and he stealths up his entire board. Okay, we have an active ability. We'll just take another free mutation. Great, love it. Fel Reaver, big frontline. Big frontline, 4/5 for 5, and on top of that, relentlessly will give 1 to all of your demons. Now, this guy does not often stick on the board. He's great for just staying alive, though. It makes the enemy have to bash things into him. He's got 5 health. He's dealing out a respectable amount of damage. If he stays on the board 1 turn, he becomes a 5/5, and with the front line and with that buff for everybody else. So really, really good utility there. Really good options. One thing to note about Ruinstorm. This is, I think, actually, it sounds weird, but one thing to note about them that I think makes them better for new players is the fact that they can only take Chaos as a neutral faction. They are not allowed to take Imperial Army or Mechanicum troops. That sounds like a disadvantage, and in many ways it is. It is. I mean, for high-level deck creation, yes, it limits your ability to some degree to do, you know, really complicated things with Ruinstorm. But for new players, it makes it a little bit simpler. You don't have to worry about building a deck where you've got, you know, you need all these Imperial Army cards. I don't have, for example, Melgator or Jubak. Melgator and Jubak feature in an absolute ton of decks. They are very common cards. Or not common in the sense of they are legendary cards, but they are very frequently played cards. Auto includes in many decks. And not for Ruinstorm. I mean, it's true, it's a limitation, but you don't have to worry about collecting them. You don't have to, you know, look at a deck list that somebody posts and be like, oh, I really don't have any Imperial Army troops. Well, okay, that's fine. Sorry, very quickly, one card I forgot to mention in the rare category, Warp Rift. Warp Rift is a hugely threatening early game drop. Warp Rift does not look like much in the sense that it is just a 1/3 can't attack, but oh my gosh, if people leave this on your board, they lose the game. They lose the game. If this thing stays on your board somehow for 2 turns, the game is basically over, unless you have drawn absurdly poorly. It reduces the cost of all demons, not just Ruinstorm demons, but also Chaos demons, in your hand by 1 relentlessly. On top of that, if you know for a fact that it is going to die, you can refill 1 of your energy with its active ability and deny the enemy the chance to kill it, for example, with a Battle Honor troop. Warp Rift is hugely versatile, and it is super, super threatening to put out turn 1. If I have a Warp Rift in my hand, and the enemy does not play a troop first turn, I am almost certainly going to play that Warp Rift and make him be on the back foot from the get-go, having to spend many more troops, points, all kinds of stuff to try to get rid of this non-threatening 1/3, because if he leaves it, suddenly I got a handful of demons that are getting out super cheap. I mean, I've had hands where I have a couple free Chaos Furies and Demon Brutes that cost 2, and, you know, it just gets crazy. It gets crazy. Okay. Now, one more reason that I think the deck is very strong, and we kind of alluded to this with the Cor'bax power, is you don't have to plan your deck to anywhere near the same kind of degree that you would plan when you are making decks for other factions that do not have these utilities built into their Warlord. You really do not need to worry about anti-stealth. You really do not need to worry about anti-ward. You don't need to worry about fast and flank as much. You can get flank out of the mutates. Everything else comes from Corbax. If they stealth something, poison it. If they put a warded thing on there, poison it. Yeah, you're going to take a hit from it, but not the end of the world. They also, when you're looking at their legendaries, have, like many factions, some good legendaries and some not very good ones. The good news with Ruinstorm is if you get their 2 top legendaries, you are set. Even 1 of the top legendaries will let you build a very, very competitive deck. Hell, I'll be straight with you. I've been playing this game for just a little under a year now. I climbed into about mid-Mars before I got any legendaries for Ruinstorm. Or no, I think I had Minutia Rakshasi, who is crap. Didn't even run it. But if you can get a Demon Chosen, or if you can get an Eletal, if you see him in the store, either one of those, can be a major finisher for you. Demon Chosen, I think we saw a game in the last series of games that I played. Demon Chosen is just an absolutely brutal card. Comes out as a 6/6 with a free mutation, and you should pretty much always take Ward if you can get it, because if this thing stays on the board, the next turn it can get itself 3 more mutations, 4 more mutations, possibly even 5 depending on when you play it. A card that has been mutated 4 or 5 times is going to be a big, big boy with a lot of special abilities. I mean, I've seen this thing have like Cleave 6 and Survivor and Ward. I mean, that's a that's a very, very powerful card. You can get so many different kinds of utility out of that. If you need to get around front lines, you can do it. If you need to cleave a bunch of stuff, you can do it. It really is a great card. And Eletal also. Eletal starts off stealth, much like the Chaos Fury card. Starts off unstoppable, and starts off as a 5/3 for 4, which is already pretty powerful as a stealth card. It will take mutations, and it will eat them up, and it will become bigger. On top of whatever the mutation is, it gets an extra +1/+1, as we can see on there. So it becomes just a really crushingly powerful card. Crushingly powerful. If you get lucky and you draw into some epics, they've got some solid epics in here, especially at the low range. I run 2 of the Unspoiled Land. It's the only draw that they have. I run 2 of the Rot Swarm because it synergizes well with a deck that likes to kill enemy troops. Kills enemy troops, it builds more Rot Flies. The enemy has to deal with this little 2-cost card that is printed out a bunch of unstoppable poisonous troops. And Chaos Fury is just the utilitarian early drop. It is able to be powerful. It can come out as a 5/3. It can come out as a 2/5 poison. It is unstoppable to start with, so it's going to dodge right around there. You know, if somebody's putting up barricades or bunkers or something, doesn't matter. You can just dodge right around it and kill what you want to kill. Chaos Fury has a ton of utility. It is an epic, but it's attainable. I mean, if you open Ruinstorm packs, you're going to get them eventually. All right. So, and then one quick note for their hard removal. They do run some hard removal. Sometimes you have to take something off the board before Corbax's ability is able to poison it off. And they have a decent hard removal. I don't think it's the best in the game, but I think it's pretty strong. Especially for things like frontline. If he puts out a 10-cost frontline or a 9-cost frontline or something like that, you hard removal it off, and then you get a copy of it. So not only do you swing the tempo of the game to destroy their frontline troop, but then you can re-swing the tempo of the game by then making them have to destroy their own frontline troop. Once again, this faction is about card creation, really, more than card draw. Currently, I don't run a ton of Chaos cards. We'll take a look at that when we get in there. But I'd be curious if you guys know about any good Chaos builds that work well for these guys. I used to run DSATs. I'm not really doing that quite so much anymore, but I know that there's definitely some Chaos troops and builds that you can work with. So with that, let's take a look at the deck, and let's see what we got in there and why. Some of this we've already covered. So Unspoiled Land, again, it's draw. That's the only draw you got. It's not great draw, but it's what you have to work with, so work with it if you can get it. I played for a long time without 2 Unspoiled Lands. It wasn't quite as effective, but it still works. I mean, again, Corbax can take you all the way up into Terra without a bunch of the cards that I'm listing. I mean, if we look at this deck, compare this to like the Blood Angels deck. The Blood Angels deck had like 6 legendaries in it. This has 3, and I didn't run Command Bridge until very recently. Hell, I didn't even run Eletal until pretty recently. And this deck can function with 1 legendary card. It can even function in Mars with none. Strong. I do run Seek and Destroy just for those targeted things early on. If I have a Plague Bearer on the board and he flops down a 3-health troop, Seek and Destroy comes out, and that's that. You get a free mutation. Beautiful. Easy, good, quick damage and removal. We talked about the Warp Rift, super heavy early threat. Same thing with Rot Swarm. If he puts things out that you know that you can kill easily, Defenders of Caliban hate this card because he puts out his little pawns, you get a Rot Swarm up, and you find a way to kill those pawns, and then suddenly it is just Rot Flies all over the place, and he can't put out more pawns because they just die and make more Rot Flies. I do run a Command Bridge. I'm a little iffy about this. I do it partially for the draw. Like if I desperately need to find hard removal, this can be a good way to do it. It's also sometimes useful to get the Path of Blood when you have Eletal coming. All right, we talked about Plague Bearer, one of the staple cards of the deck. This deck is all about generating a ton of mutations and using the mutations on your demons, making your demons big and scary, and then letting them go to town all over the enemy's face. Same thing with the Fallen. Big damage, Frontline slows down the enemy. Corbax is fine with slower games. He wants to get into the 7 or 8, 9 energy turn where he can start dropping other stuff. Path of Blood is huge utility. I mean, you could maybe mutate 4 different demons with this card during the course of the game. And if you're desperate for a card, you can mutate an already mutated demon, and then on top of that, draw. Not terrible. Not terrible. I don't run 2 anymore because I felt like I was having a situation where I was having 2 of these and some other tactic in my hand and no demons to play them on. But I think 1 Path of Blood is a very, very strong, practically auto-include. Love the Chaos Furies, talked about those, just workhorses. Same thing with Demonettes, workhorse ambush, early game troop. Silent Death is almost perfectly designed for Corbax, because the 2 things in this game that go really well together, other than Sacrifice and Survivor, are Poison and Stun. Corbax can poison everything on the board and stun everything on the board. They have 2 big troops out that are both going to smash you for 7 energy. You can guarantee that they die, because who runs anti-stun and anti-poison? Only a couple of decks I've ever seen. Just stun them both, poison them both, that's it. Note that it only works on undamaged enemies, though, so do not ping their faces or something first. We got the Elemental. Generally, the tactic here is generate up a bunch of mutations with Plague Bearers. You know, get 3 mutations in your hand, maybe a couple mutations and a Path of Blood. Get the Elemental out on the board, mutate it 3 or 4 times, and just send it in, and it'll just start wrecking faces all over the place. I mean, this thing can do, you know, if you have a like 9 attack Elemental with Terror and Ward, they're already in almost an unrecoverable position. Plague Ridden, we talked about it. It's card creation. We don't have draw, so we got to create. Fel Reaver, same thing as the Fallen. They're just the Fallen's bigger brother. Demon Brutes is the absolute workhorse. They are like the Chaos Fury. They're one of these like ultra versatile troops. It's just the big brother of the Chaos Fury. You put out the Demon Brutes in the mid game. You need wide removal. They can do it. You need high single target damage. They can do it. You need survivability. They can do that. They can do what you need. They're there to help. Demon Chosen, same thing. We talked about this. Best card in the Ruinstorm faction. One of the top legendaries, in my opinion. I think it is arguably one of the better legendaries in the game. Certainly not like the top 2 or 3, but it is high up there. It is a very, very good legendary for 6 points. 6. Deceit for the hard removal. Gittlejaw to get those mutations in the late game. You know, because your little guys are usually dying by this point. You might not have mutation generators left. Gittlejaw can, if you get 2 of these things on the board and you're getting 2 mutations in your hand every single turn, that's huge. That's huge. That's potentially tons and tons of damage for just 1 or 2 extra energy. And then our last guy, Ula. This was a recent acquisition. I did not have one of him. Ula, Doom of Heroes, is a very strong late game quasi-finisher. Because, as we can see in there, he is stealth. The enemy, by this point, has had to face a lot of stealth. They've had to face getting through 2 Chaos Furies and potentially 2 stealth Demonettes. Possibly an Elemental. I mean, there are 5 troops in here that we can put out with stealth. The enemy is not necessarily expecting to face a ton of stealth when they're playing Ruinstorm. So they get rid of their anti-stealth on these guys, and then Ula comes out, and Ula can just sit there in the smoke cloud, pumping out 4 damage for 1 energy every single time. If you need troops, you can capture them with Ula. He is a delight. I'm not sure I would run 2 at an 8 cost, but just 1 of him is super, super, super strong. All right. So now that we've seen that, we have seen Corbax and his powers and abilities. I just want to reinforce, I think this is the ultimate Warlord for new players. He's forgiving, he's tough, he has a relatively small card pool that you have to collect in order to build a good deck, and many of his staple cards are commons and rares. You don't have to worry about the variety in deck construction. You can just kind of hope for the best. Play to win, swing for the stars. We'll take a look at a game here. We'll see how we do against possibly various games. Okay. And that's exactly it. The enemy is terrified of Cor'bax Utterblight. They see that man come along, and they think it's impossible to win. There's no point. Folks, you saw the unleashed power of Corbax Utterblight. We did not have to play a single card, and that big, brave Ultramarine was shattered into pieces, left crying on his floor. All right, that's all I have for the day. Thanks for coming out and watching this video. Let me know what you think the best beginner warlords in the game are. If you say Karn, I won't ban you from the channel, but I will cry on the inside. I will cry. All right. Hey, thanks again for all the support, guys. Remember to check out the Warp Chatter podcast. As I mentioned, I'll be on next week's episode. It's going to be a blast. I can't wait to see it. And if you have any feedback, if you want to put in your own favorite noob warlord choices, I would love to see them. All right, guys, this is Automatic Jack signing off.